The unraveling. When hatred turns inward, it arrives not with fanfare, but with a quiet, seismic shift. The moment the person who viewed you with contempt, who tracked your steps with a jaw clenched tight around silent curses, begins to fracture. This moment is often misunderstood. Its significance lies not in any petty vindication you might feel at their distress, but in the profound, sobering lesson it delivers about the architecture of the human spirit and the laws of emotional physics. Malice is never a static condition. It is a living, consuming force. When someone dedicates themselves to resenting you, to whispering wishes for your downfall into the dark, they do not remain a casual observer of your existence. They begin a meticulous, exhausting renovation of their own inner world, building its rooms around your silhouette. Their mornings are greeted by the ghost of your achievements. Their sense of value becomes a distorted reflection in your mirror. They curate a private museum of perceived slights, most of them paintings they alone have brushed into being. And with each day spent in this curation, they are feeding a creature that gnaws only on its keeper. You, meanwhile, were walking a different road. You absorbed the blows without broadcasting the bruises. You shouldered your obligations when it would have been easier to shrug. You transformed pain not into a weapon, but into weight for your strengthening core. You were not flawless, but you became accountable. You mended what was within your reach. You chose words with intention. You labored in the quiet hours, witnessed only by your own resolve. Most crucially, you refused the seductive, identity-forging cloak of bitterness. That daily refusal, small, repetitive, undramatic, was what set the mechanism in motion. Here lies the uncomfortable core of it. Those who harbor hatred for you are not fortified by it. They are made fragile. Their desperation to frame your success as a fluke is a lifeline. If your progress is earned, then their stagnation is a choice. That is a verdict too heavy for a spirit weakened by envy to bear. So they construct an alternative reality. They weave narratives where your efforts are minimized and your character is caricatured. But reality operates on a different timeline, patient, indifferent, and utterly unconcerned with our fictions. Inevitably, the makeshift structure trembles. The stories lose their power to persuade, even their teller. They see you still upright, still advancing, still refining. And the energy they once spent trying to dismantle your image finds no external target. It has nowhere to go but home. That is when the foundation cracks. That is when the resentment, with no remaining outlet, performs its alchemical change into regret, into disorientation, into shame. Do not misinterpret this spectacle. This is not karma as cosmic retribution. It is consequence as psychological law. When a person builds their interior castle upon the shifting sands of envy and antagonism, the rot begins within the walls. Anxiety becomes a permanent resident. Paranoia whispers from the corners. They grow to distrust others, recognizing in them the same shadows that dance in their own heart. And when their chosen antagonist, you, simply refuses to play the destined role of ruin, the entire script falls apart. The sound you hear is not triumph, but the echo of a trap springing shut. It is the moment their projection fails as a shield, forcing them to confront the raw truth. You are not the architect of their collapse. They provided the blueprint, they laid every stone. Your responsibility in this moment is critical. This is not an invitation to celebration. To revel would be to descend to the arena you worked so hard to leave. You did not endure simply to become a mirror of the very pettiness you withstood. No, this is the moment for unshakable steadiness, for maintained discipline, for a humility that needs no audience. Genuine strength does not proclaim itself. It needs no soundtrack of applause. It is revealed incrementally through the relentless compound interest of consistency and restraint. You need not utter, "Look at them now." The evidence is already on display. Your silence here is not a void. It is a statement. It is proof of maturity. Understand this too, their tears are not an automatic absolution. Suffering does not always forge wisdom. Sometimes it merely deepens the well of spite. Your task is not to rescue them from the well they dug. Your task is to ensure you never find yourself at its edge. Maintain your boundaries, uphold your standards. Continue your forward march. You paid a price in a currency they refused to spend. You carried weights they dismissed as illusions. You stared into truths they averted their eyes from. That is the reason you remain standing. That is why the trap of their own design closed around them. Let this moment crystallize a fundamental principle. When you align your life with honesty, with ownership of your path, and with a commitment to slow, steady growth, you need not wage war against your detractors. Time becomes your ally. Reality administers a justice of brutal, impeccable fairness. So walk on. Do not let your gaze linger too long in the rear view. Absorb the lesson, then return your hands to the work of building. The tears you witness are not your trophy. Your victory is that you no longer require their approval, their fear, or their disintegration to validate your existence. You endured. You grew resilient. And that, more than anything else, is what they could never comprehend and thus could never forgive. The corrosive economy of hatred. Hatred is not a dormant emotion you can shelve and forget. It is active, a currency spent in a bankrupt economy. When someone truly invests in hating you, that investment reshapes their entire psychic portfolio. Their attention narrows to a single burning stock. Their thoughts circle the same bitter data points in an endless, fruitless loop. Instead of asking, "What can I create?" they obsess over, "What does they represent that I lack?" This is where the true bankruptcy begins. Initially, hatred feels like a dividend. It grants a perverse sense of purpose, offering a villain to blame for personal frustration, professional stagnation, the gnawing sense of being left behind. You are cast as the protagonist in their tragedy of unfairness. For a season, the story holds. It is a shield against self-scrutiny. As long as you are the problem, their own choices remain safely unexamined. But the human psyche cannot sustain such a deficit spending of emotional energy without accruing catastrophic interest. Hatred demands constant capital. It requires vigilant monitoring of your advances, your setbacks, your words, your silence. They compare their blooper reel to your highlight tape, even while professing indifference. Each of your small victories is a minor market crash for them. Every hardship you weather and survive baffles their economic forecast. Slowly, imperceptibly, their emotional reserves are bled dry. What rushes in to fill the void is not wealth, but the toxic asset of anxiety. To live in perpetual opposition is to live in a state of reactive panic. Your worth, pegged to another's currency, is never stable. If you rise, they feel devalued. If you stand firm, they feel exposed. The body keeps this ledger, sleep becomes thin and restless, the mind a loud trading floor of repetitive, fearful thoughts. Then comes the true insolvency, a heavy, settled bitterness, not the sharp flash of anger, but a deep, pervasive rust. This bitterness tints their entire world. Opportunities look like liability traps. Colleagues and friends seem like competitors in a zero-sum game. Even good news feels like a personal insult, a reminder of their own portfolio's poor performance. Here, hatred completes its turn inward, poisoning the well from which its host drinks. The irreversible law here is this: hatred cannot coexist with honest self-audit. To grow, a person must acknowledge deficits, weaknesses, miscalculations. But hatred's entire business model requires the illusion of moral superiority. It demands they are the wronged creditor, you the insolvent debtor. So growth is halted, learning ceases, adaptation is forsaken. While they are frozen defending a failing narrative, the market of life moves on. Meanwhile, you perhaps clumsily but consistently stay in the game. You struggle, adjust, fail, recalibrate. You do not center your identity on their rating agency. This divergence becomes unbearable for the one consumed by hatred. They feel trapped in a comparison they are guaranteed to lose. Their own lack of compound growth becomes a glaring, inescapable balance sheet. The very emotion they wielded as a weapon of leverage now becomes a mirror reflecting their own empty vaults. This is the moment of financial collapse. It may manifest as reckless anger, a desperate short, as profound sadness, a realization of total loss, or as confused tears, the final acknowledgement of bankruptcy. At its core, it is the same. Their internal financial structure can no longer support the debt of resentment they've accrued. The hatred that felt like leverage is revealed as catastrophic liability. The sobering truth? You did not cause this crash. You did not short their stock. All you did was refuse to take on their toxic debt. You chose fiscal responsibility, owning your own balance sheet over the Ponzi scheme of blame. Your choice protected your solvency. Their choice led to their ruin. Hatred always demands a sacrifice. It promises the sacrifice will be yours. In the end, the sacrifice is always their own: peace, clarity, growth, and finally, dignity. When you understand this, you stop personalizing their hostility. You see it for what it is: the frantic trading alert of a psyche in internal collapse, using you as a ticker symbol. Instead of buying into the panic, you hold. You stay grounded. You allow them to wrestle with the consequences of the emotional derivatives they chose to trade. This isn't cruelty. It is the natural outcome of a law as firm as gravity. We reap what we sow, most intimately within ourselves. The quiet discipline of non-reaction, conventional wisdom equates power with loud confrontation. Strength, we're told, is proving your point publicly, defending your territory with visible force, ensuring the world knows you have been wronged. This is an understandable yet fundamentally flawed equation. Real power rarely announces itself on a bullhorn. It operates in the substrate, through quiet, relentless consistency. When you choose disciplined focus over emotional reaction, you begin to operate on a frequency many cannot even perceive. From the outside, quiet discipline looks mundane. It is waking to do the necessary work when no one is offering a cheerleader's reward. It is mastering your tongue when a cutting remark is justified and would feel cathartic. It is honing your craft while others are busy constructing elaborate excuses for their stagnation. This discipline does not deliver instant emotional returns. In fact, it often feels inequitable. You bear your frustrations privately while others seem to profit from chaos. Yet that very patience is the source of its formidable power. Confrontation is a day trader screaming for immediate payoff, for validation now. Discipline is a long-term investor. It plays the decades-long game. When you decline to engage in non-essential conflict, you withdraw from your detractors' emotional economy. You deny them the drama that makes them feel solvent and significant. Something profound then occurs. They are left alone with the volatile asset of their own behavior. People who thrive on conflict believe they control the market because they can provoke volatility. Your anger is their confirmation of influence. Your argument is their proof of power. When you do not react, when you simply continue building your life with steady, silent effort, they lose all leverage. They cannot pull you into their chaotic trading. That silence forces upon them a question they have desperately avoided. If I cannot move their market, was my influence ever real? Discipline also builds credit in ways confrontation never can. Anyone can yell. Anyone can issue a bearish report on another's character. Very few can endure pressure without having their own principles devalued. When others witness you remain steady amidst volatility, your actions congruent even when treated unfairly, they take note. They may not comment, but they register the data. Over time, your consistency becomes a blue-chip stock in the marketplace of reputation, not because you advertised it, but because its performance speaks for itself. There is a deeper personal dividend. Every time you choose discipline over confrontation, you strengthen your internal governance. You train in the art of delayed gratification. You learn that emotions are data, not directors. This internal order is priceless capital. It makes you resistant to market manipulation, hard to derail, impossible to intimidate. You become an entity that can be trusted with great responsibility because you are not ruled by the impulsive trades of sentiment. Confrontation often masquerades as decisive action when it is merely reaction in a costume of courage. Discipline feels passive, but it is intensely active. It requires strategic planning, rigorous restraint, and faith in the long-term revelation of truth. And truth does reveal itself, not in dramatic press releases, but in the steady, undeniable trend lines that emerge over quarters and years. When you stay disciplined, consequences unfold without you placing a single frantic trade. People who deal in falsehoods must continually cover their short positions with more lies. Those who manipulate must constantly adjust their schemes. Those who attack others eventually see their own instability become their defining public metric. You need not issue a corrective report. You simply need to maintain your own audit integrity and keep your footing solid. Reality has a relentless accounting department, and it always reconciles the books. This approach also provides a critical hedge. It protects you from becoming what you oppose. When you fight someone on their terms, you adopt their unstable currency. You let their chaotic market determine your trades. Discipline keeps your portfolio intact. It ensures that even in an unjust market, you do not engage in unjust practices to compete. That is not a weakness, it is ethical alpha. In time, the contrast becomes the story. The market sees who has sustainable growth and who is plagued by boom and bust cycles, who is building real equity and who is merely reacting to daily ticks, who is a stable store of value and who is unraveling. By then, no argument is needed. The performance chart speaks with eloquent, brutal clarity. Quiet discipline is not passivity or fear. It is the strategic choice for a form of strength that compounds, the kind that needs no press release, the kind that outlasts noise, resentment, and the illusion of short-term victories. When you internalize this, the urge to prove yourself evaporates. You realize that staying focused, consistent, and grounded is already executing the most powerful strategy of all. And that is why disciplined patience over the long arc outperforms volatile confrontation every single time. The narrative they couldn't sustain, those who hate you often become prisoners of a story they author and star in. You are cast as the antagonist, the narrative obstacle to their success, the unjust variable in their life equation. Every minor stumble you make is seized as a plot twist confirming your villainy. Every success is explained away as luck, privilege, or deception. They build elaborate sets and write convincing dialogue to avoid the terrifying truth. Their primary antagonist is their own choices. This story feels safe, a shelter from the storm of personal accountability, but reality is an indifferent critic. It does not review or revise our personal scripts. Eventually, the dissonance between the actual footage of your life and the edited highlight reel they've constructed about you becomes too glaring to ignore. They watch day after day as you move forward, learn, survive, and even thrive despite the obstacles they hoped would be definitive. Each day of your progress is a small crack in the set walls of their story. Unattended, these cracks spiderweb, widening into fissures of panic. When someone mortgages their self-worth on the idea that you are the problem, your growth constitutes an existential threat. It exposes the narrative's flimsy foundation. It forces a confrontation with the true script. The issue was never your role, but their own direction, their missed cues, their poor preparation. This is a climax they never wrote and do not want to perform. They do not merely hate you, they are dependent on that hatred for narrative coherence. Without it, the plot collapses, and they are left on a bare stage with the only character they've neglected, their own accountable self. This confrontation with reality is never a gentle denouement. It begins as irritability, small, sharp moments of envy like faulty stage lights. Every goal you reach that they deemed impossible for you triggers a flash of panic, a missed line. This builds into a roiling resentment, and finally, that resentment has nowhere to project but inward. They become acutely aware of their own understudy status because the story that protected them, the one where you are the villain, can no longer hold the audience of their own mind. Once the story fails, they are left standing in the wreckage of their own production, exposed under the harsh work lights. The collapse is emotional, angry outbursts, quiet tears, a withdrawn silence, but the deeper effect is narrative. The creative energy they invested in hating you, in scripting your life as their own tragic foil, is revealed as wasted capital. They begin to question their own characters' motives, decisions, and fundamental integrity. Hatred, their chosen plot device, twists into a trapdoor on their own stage. Meanwhile, your narrative proceeds independently. You were never a character in their play. You never required their review to validate your arc. By building your story on the raw materials of reality, responsibility, effort, incremental improvement, you created a narrative with inherent integrity. Your growth does not rely on villainizing others. It relies on the protagonist's development. That stark contrast makes the unraveling of their fictionalized subplot inevitable. This is also a masterclass in authorial restraint. You need not write a critique of their failed play. You need not take a bow at their expense. Doing so would only entangle you in a drama you've already transcended. The most powerful response is to continue performing your own script with quiet conviction. Let them watch. Let reality deliver the review. Let the thematic patterns emerge on their own. They are forced to face the truth of the narrative, regardless of their readiness. The truth is stark. Your resilience and success are not a deus ex machina. They are earned page by page through the hard work of consistent character development. The psychological principle here is clear. Those who anchor their identity to another's perceived villainy will always face a third-act crisis when confronted with the undeniable evidence of their own protagonist's flaws. You need not engineer this crisis. Your role is to stay true to your own character's journey, to maintain your discipline, and to refuse to speak lines from their toxic script. The rest is simply the director's cut of reality playing out. In the end, their inability to control the audience's perception, their dependence on a false narrative, and their refusal to edit their own character's flaws converge. The story they relied on to justify their hatred crumbles in the third act. They see your character's arc progressing, powerless to rewrite it. The realization is devastating, for it forces a final, horrible rewrite. The obstacle was never you. It was their own unreliable narrator, their own poor choices, their own refusal to engage with the authentic plot. This is the profound takeaway. When you refuse to let hatred, envy, or fear dictate your character's actions, you create a narrative force that exposes the genre limitations of anyone relying on deception and resentment. Your growth becomes the irrefutable proof that integrity, persistence, and personal responsibility are themes with far greater staying power and resonance than those of malice or obsession. In observing your story, they can no longer hide from this truth. And that is why their narrative fails, why their internal set collapses, and why their production about you closes to empty houses, leaving them alone to reckon with the consequences of their own creative choices. The high cost of gloating when the person who directed hatred toward you begins to break, a visceral satisfaction can surge like adrenaline. The impulse to gloat, to point, to ensure they feel the full weight of their failure and your perceived victory is a primal pull. It feels like poetic justice. It feels like closure. But that satisfaction is a short-term loan with a vicious interest rate. To indulge it is to re-enter the very emotional economy you work to escape. It tethers your state to their collapse, making you reactive once more. Maturity in this crucible is the choice for higher ground. It is recognizing that their breaking point does not define your worth, and their pain is not a metric of your superiority. True growth is measured by how you act when you have every reason to claim a trophy, but instead choose to remain composed, your integrity intact. Every choice in these charged moments is a brick in the architecture of your character. You are building a structure resistant to emotional squalls, immune to the petty dramas that consumed them, steadfast in its own foundation. Restraint here is not weakness. It is a deliberate, active strength. It demands you audit your impulses and decide which are assets and which are liabilities. The desire to humiliate offers immediate emotional liquidity, but it reinvests in the cycle of negativity it claims to escape. Each act of restraint strengthens your internal governance. Each moment you refuse an unnecessary reaction is a deposit into your fund of resilience. The person who hated you sought to control the narrative through emotional stimulus and response. Your silence and measure deny them that directorial control. Their collapse is a testament to their own internal chaos, not a validation of your power. To gloat is to validate their importance in your emotional ledger, creating a tether between their suffering and your satisfaction that ultimately binds you to their instability. Conversely, observing their unraveling without personal entanglement grants clarity. You see the pattern clearly: obsession, envy, the refusal to self-audit. Witnessing this truth without buying into its drama allows you to learn, adapt, and maintain sovereign control over your own narrative. Choosing composure also protects your long-term psychological capital. Gloating trains the mind to seek satisfaction externally in the misfortunes of others. It cultivates a reactive, dependency-based psychology. Composure, however, cultivates independence. Your sense of accomplishment is derived from your own actions and growth, an internal dividend no external market crash can affect. That independence is a form of power utterly immune to circumstance. Furthermore, refraining from gloating sets a precedent, first for yourself, then for observers. It demonstrates that emotional and moral intelligence are not about responding to every provocation, but about discerning which battles actually advance your core objectives. Not every insult requires a counter-suit. Not every attempt at humiliation merits a public relations campaign. The ability to choose when to engage and when to observe is a hallmark of strategic strength. It conserves vital energy for meaningful growth and genuine challenges. There is strategic depth to this restraint. By not reacting to their collapse, you maintain a powerful unpredictability. They cannot model your behavior or use your response against you because you remain consistent and composed. You exit their emotional game entirely. The psychological leverage they believed they held evaporates. Your silence and steadiness amplify their perception of your unshakable foundation, increasing their discomfort without a single word from you. Empathy, in a dispassionate sense, also plays a role. Maintaining composure can involve a recognition of the profound human cost of their choices. Their suffering is the yield of their own internal investments, not a product you manufactured. Acknowledging this allows for a detached, almost clinical understanding that fortifies your wisdom for future challenges, free from the corrosive temptation of schadenfreude. Ultimately, maturity here is about sovereignty. The breakdown of a detractor is a moment of clarity, a silent, powerful confirmation of the resilience built through your patience, responsibility, and discipline. Your task is to integrate that lesson without letting it compromise your principles. The real victory is not in their tears, but in the unassailable integrity of your own character. By resisting the urge to gloat, you transform a potential moment of petty reactivity into a moment of strategic poise. You free your energy to flow into constructive action, into your own goals and growth, rather than into the fleeting, hollow satisfaction of another's humiliation. That choice ensures your triumphs are authentic, enduring, and wholly your own, rooted not in the misfortune of others, but in your own consistent, disciplined effort. Your power does not depend on the collapse of those who hated you. It depends on your own unwavering choice to act with integrity, to stay grounded, and to let reality, not your fleeting impulses, direct the course of your life. That is the essence of true, durable strength. The compound interest of integrity, genuine strength, is not measured in the decibels of one argument, but in the silent, compounding returns of character over time. Long-term integrity is the principle that transcends the immediate gratification of a pointed rebuttal or a moment of perceived victory. It is built in the private hours, through choices made when there is no audience to applaud, no external reward for doing the right, difficult thing. Those fixated on malice, envy, or revenge are day trading with their emotions. They seek the quick spike of seeing a rival stumble. But reality does not reward impulsive, reactive energy in the long run. It rewards the patient, persistent accumulation of virtue, responsibility, and truth. When you align yourself with consistency, you lay a foundation that no market panic can shake. Each principled choice reinforces the next, compounding gradually into a life of formidable, unassailable stability. This is the great divergence between those who endure and those who implode. The impulsive, the emotionally volatile may score temporary points, but their progress is built on algorithmic trading, fast, fragile, and vulnerable to the slightest shift in sentiment. You are building something different, a fortress anchored in the bedrock of self-awareness, ownership, and disciplined action. It can weather storms because its strength comes from within, not from prevailing conditions. Consider the individuals who invested their energy in opposing you. In the moment, their actions may have seemed potent. They may have appeared to move markets. Yet time, the ultimate auditor, reveals the chasm between superficial force and enduring strength. While they were focused on shorting your stock, you were focused on developing your product, building your brand, and strengthening your operational integrity. That focus yielded skills, relationships, and resilience that form a durable competitive advantage. Their interference, reframed through this lens, became your stress test, an opportunity to practice patience, strategic thinking, and discernment. Long-term integrity also provides a crucial hedge against the pitfalls inherent to malice. Those dependent on destructive behaviors for a sense of significance are trapped in a cycle of instability. Their wins are shallow, their triumphs hollow, for they lack the underlying asset of disciplined character. Your progress, however, is fully backed. It is earned through sustained R&D and careful investment in your own growth. No momentary emotional surge or external event can trigger a margin call on your core values because your foundation is internally collateralized. This approach also generates significant psychological leverage. People driven by impulsive malice are predictable in their chaos. Their emotions are their algorithms, blinding them to long-term risk. A life built on consistency and principle, however, presents a baffling equation to would-be manipulators. They cannot model your next move because you are not a function of their actions, but of your own disciplined strategy. This strategic unpredictability disarms hostility without confrontation and neutralizes undermining attempts passively. Time is the multiplier. Small, disciplined actions, repeated over months and years, compound in ways invisible on a daily chart but undeniable in a 5-year report. The malicious actor may dominate a news cycle, but over time their lack of foresight, emotional recklessness, and ethical compromises accrue. Their relationships sour, their credibility craters, their mental stability becomes a liability. Meanwhile, your consistent, principled choices create a trajectory whose value appreciates with each passing quarter. In the long view, the ephemeral cannot compete with the enduring. This is also an ethical and strategic imperative. By committing to integrity, you remove the temptation to compromise your values for a quick gain. You refuse to engage in the same high-risk, high-drama behavior your detractors employ. This is not merely noble, it is shrewd. Those who act with impulsive malice are often ensnared by the complex derivatives of their own choices. Your refusal to participate keeps your balance sheet clean, your judgment clear, and your path unobstructed. You become resilient to both external challenges and the internal traps of bitterness or reactive envy. Moreover, long-term integrity builds monumental brand equity, trust. Those who observe you recognize consistency. They see an entity whose actions are congruent with its stated values, whose word is bond, and whose decisions reflect thoughtful risk assessment. That trust compounds. People and opportunities gravitate toward reliability and stability. In contrast, individuals who operate on manipulation and short-term cunning struggle to form lasting alliances. Their networks are built on speculative partnerships, fragile and prone to sudden dissolution. Finally, embracing long-term integrity is the ultimate empowerment because it shifts your focus from trying to control volatile external actors to mastering your own internal fund. You cannot dictate the actions of those who oppose you. You cannot prevent their envy or their malice, but you have full control over your response. You can maintain your operational discipline, pursue organic growth, and invest energy in projects that build lasting enterprise value. This internal control is the true source of alpha. It ensures your life is not a derivative of someone else's performance, but a standalone entity thriving on its own merits. When you understand this, you see that short-term malice is the ultimate value trap. It offers a temporary liquidity event but leaves the individual financially, emotionally, and morally bankrupt. Long-term integrity, however, compounds into enduring strength, resilience, and profound influence. The consequences of others, malice cannot trigger your collapse if your life is built on the solid fundamentals of responsibility, principle, and relentless consistency. That is the ultimate, unassailable advantage, the invisible fortress that protects you from the chaotic volatility of hatred. It is why, over the full arc of time, those who trade in malice are liquidated by their own poor strategies, while those who remain disciplined and principled appreciate steadily, their value secure and their future entirely their own.